Alright guys, so today we're going to talk about actually making a mastering template using Pro Tools. You can do a lot in Pro Tools. You can do some of the same processing. We know in mastering we still use the same tools like EQ, compression, multiband compression, limiters, all those same tools. But Pro Tools itself is not a mastering DAW. But there is a way that we can actually begin to build a workflow, a more efficient workflow in order to master our session. So we've kind of stripped down the whole session where we just have a print of the mix. We don't want to work with all the multi-tracks because that's just going to get in the way of what we're trying to do. We're trying to affect the final product. All right, so I've got a couple tracks up. I've got 4 tracks up. And let's talk about these 4 tracks. First up, we have an audio track. This is where you're going to put your 2-bus mix, the print. The mix that you've made. This is where this is going to go. This is going to route into your auxiliary track. And so the auxiliary track is going to be used for processing. And so after we have our processing, we need to bounce this out or, print it internally, a layback. So we're going to print that into this audio 2 track. And then finally, your master track is going to be used for your metering tools. So let's label these guys. Audio 1 would be my mix. That's where my audio track is. Aux 1 would be my processing. Audio 2 would be my print or my final master. And then this master track is going to be used for metering. All right, so you can see that I've already added my audio track there on that very first track. So now let's route that. So this audio track is going to go through this auxiliary track for processing. So I'm just going to come out and I'm going to go directly into that processing track. For my input for my print, I'll use bus 1 and 2. And I'll route the processing out to that. So I'll have to come here and go to print, and there we are. So once I play back, I don't hear anything. I need to put the print track into input monitoring. So we've got audio. So let's talk a little bit about processing. I've made a track preset just to kind of get us going. Let me load those. All right, so we learned in Pro Tools about the different types of meters. So for my metering on my master track, I want kind of like RMS. I want to see the average level of how loud everything is. And then for the other tracks, we can keep those at simple piece to make sure that we're not clipping internally. Let's look at some of those parameters that we have or plugins we have on the metering. I've got a basic analyzer so I can see the frequency and the phase. Meters so I can see it's just same thing as this main meter, but it's just a different view, different reference point. And the same thing for my loudness meter. So it's telling me the average loudness unit using loudness units full scale. And so the digital standard right now for like Spotify and YouTube, I think that's around -14 dB full scale. Well, loudness units full scale. But most recordings are still up around -10, -9 due to the loudness wars and things like that. And we'll talk about that later. But so let's play the track. I'm gonna let's see. I turned out all my processing. Let's start it over.
You killed with this one.
shining with her whipping, cooking beats in the kitchen. I got some.
So a drastic difference, but the main thing you're hearing is that volume. So let's turn everything. Let's get all these meters open so you can see those. All right, and we'll do one processor at a time. So here are the movements I made on the EQ. So I'll just loop a little bit.
25 trying to make a.
This is Audri, by the way. This song is going to drop pretty soon. Please go patronize and purchase it. All right, so let's loop this portion.
Yeah, about to be 25, trying to make a way where I'm wishing that my dreams come true. I'm a hero on a mission. They just shining with her whipping, cooking beats in the kitchen. I got some college buddies weeping who really rockin' with me, and I appreciate it. Yeah, about to be 25, trying to make a way where I'm wishing that my dreams come true.
So hopefully you heard those differences. Let me explain what I was doing. So on the low end, I just put a filter, a high pass filter, just below 30 hertz, just trying to clean up some of the mud that you don't necessarily need. And if you notice, all my movements are very subtle. I haven't done anything beyond 2 dB, because when we're working with mastering, any change we do is going to affect the entire mix and everything. We're changing the phase relationship of all the instruments. So primarily what I did was I started with the cut just to get rid of junk that I can't hear. My speakers can't reproduce. I don't have a sub at home, things like that. And then I started with just a high-end presence boost, just right around 10K, no more than 2 dB. So let's start with just those two. So I'm gonna mute those middle frequencies and we'll bypass and hit those two.
Yeah, about to be 25, trying to make a way where I'm wishing that my dreams with her whipping, cooking beats in the kitchen. I got some college buddies weeping who really rockin' with me, and I appreciate it. Yeah, about to be 25, trying to make a way where I'm wishing that my dreams come.
So we're just adding a little presence, getting rid of a little low end rumble, so her voice is a lot cleaner. You can hear those airy instruments up top just clean up. And then there were some middle frequencies that were really bothering me, so I'll exaggerate those for you.
Yeah, about to be 25, trying to make a way where I'm wishing that my dreams come true. I'm a hero on a mission. They just shining with her whipping, cooking beats in the kitchen. I got some college buddies weeping who really rockin' with me, and I appreciate it. Yeah, about to be 25, trying to make a way where I'm wishing that my dreams come true. I'm a hero on a mission. They just shining with her whipping.
And finally, I wanted to accent her voice a little bit and just bring it out a little bit around 2K.
Yeah, about to be 25, trying to make a way where I'm wishing that my dreams come true. I'm a hero on a mission. They just shining with her whipping, cooking beats in the kitchen. I got some college buddies weeping who really rockin' with.
All right, and so now let's bring up the compressor. You can hear my fan running. All right, so now here's the compressor. So in mastering, we like to use smaller ratios. So I'm using 1.5 to 1. So for every 1.5 dB that goes over, only 1 dB will pass. And so I'm only compressing roughly 3 dB, and so that's where my depth is. So I don't want to compress more than 3 dB. And then I'm gonna make that up right here with my makeup game.
Yeah, about to be 25, trying to make a way where I'm wishing that my dreams come true. I'm a hero on a mission. They just shining with her whipping, cooking beats in the kitchen. I got some college buddies weeping who really rockin'.
So all of a sudden you hear things glued together. That music comes up and wraps around her voice. Let's go to where a lot of the drums come in.
I'm trying to get this paper. Look to God to provide. I gotta be creative. Trying to vlog through it all. This just makes me impatient. But I'm learning to face it. I love the challenges. Everything that's involved, in spite of a fall. Get back up and ball. Get back up and ball. I'm not into quitting it all. They won't put my back against the wall.
So everything just falls in place. So right now I have a very quick attack and cause compared to the attack, a slow release. So I'm trying not to hear the compressor pump and overwork. I just want to glue the track together. And so the last thing I have in the chain is my limiter. And so limiter is gonna bring up that volume. So this is our digital limiter. So I've set my ceiling to be minus 0.1 because we know 0 is our scale. Once we get up to 0, we're clipping. So I'm just below 0 so I don't clip. And I'm gonna bring my threshold down. It's gonna give me makeup gain, and so it's gonna bring my overall volume up. So I'm at what, minus 4 dB. So I'll start at 0.
I'm trying to get this paper. Look to God to provide. I gotta be creative. Trying to vlog through it all. This just makes me impatient. But I'm learning to face it. I love the challenges. Everything that's involved, in spite of a fall. Get back up and ball. Get back up and ball. I'm not into quitting it all. They won't put my back against the wall. I won't let them catch me off guard. I'm on the aim to doing my part. Ready, set, go. I'm ready to ball. It ain't no blueprint for it. I gotta do my own thing. I gotta drive for it. Hit the gas in my own lane. I'm gonna strive for it. Fly with the stars like a plane. I spread my wings and I fly. Thanking God for broken pain. It ain't no blueprint for it. I gotta do my own thing. I gotta drive for it.
All right, so we've got dithering here. We got our noise shaping. So let's say I'm done with this master. I'm ready to print it. So now I'll put the print track and record enable, and I will actually record that track all the way through.
Day you killed with this one.
All right, so now let's look at the waveforms. So we can see that we've got a lot more volume out of those tracks. So we just recorded all that processing onto our print track, and now we have a final master.